Dr. Marcus Collins, welcome to this event. Thank you so much for joining us. And sorry that we're speaking through a screen, but we are so excited to hear from you today.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. You know, I lost my father just recently, so that's the only reason why I'm not there. Otherwise, I would totally be there. So I'm glad that we're able to accommodate it through these means.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, and thank you for your time. We really do appreciate it. I do want to start today just by setting the scene. I'm really curious about how someone like you, or anyone really, becomes an expert in culture. Can you take us through a bit of your professional journey? I have told the people who were briefing me on this that I think that you should run for president, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Talk us through your professional journey. How did you become the expert on culture?
You know, it was very serendipitous. It was nowhere in my 5-year, 10-year, 20-year, 30-year plan by any stretch. In fact, my goal as a kid was to be the 5th member of Boyz II Men. That's what I was aiming for. That's what I wanted. You know, they need a good baritone in there. That's what I was going for. But when I graduated from high school, I did well in math and science. In the 90s, if you did well in math and science, and you're in the United States and you're black, you're gonna be an engineer, full stop. So that's what I did. I went into engineering, not sound engineering, but material science engineering.
Wow.
So I thought that polymers were cool. And when I got to school, I realized that polymers were interesting, I just wasn't interested. Mm-hmm. And I remember coming home from school after my first year of college, and my GPA was terrible. And I said, Mom, Dad, I don't think that engineering's for me. My mother, who's an academic, says, wait until you get into your major, you'll love it. Well, I didn't love it, newsflash. And so I ended up taking some music theory courses to offset my terrible GPA. It was terrible, like almost failing out of school. I took some music theory courses and I found major sevenths and fell in love with major sevenths and modal mixtures. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I came home and said, Mom and Dad, I know what I want to be when I grow up. And they're like, out with it, tell us. I say, I want to be a songwriter. They go, oh, no, you don't.
Not that.
No, not going to happen. I remember this conversation so vividly. I remember saying to my mom, what if I meet Quincy Jones and Quincy Jones wants to sign me? And she looked me in my eyes, in the windows of my soul, and says, I don't care if Jesus Christ wants to sign me. It ain't happening. So I went back to school to finish my engineering degree, but I spent all my time in the recording studio there. So the university had a very, very, very robust sound engineering program that I ended up taking all the classes in. So I took composition courses, theory courses, and sound engineering courses along with my engineering classwork. And I spent all my time in the recording studio learning how to work a euphonics board. I was learning how to use Pro Tools HD. I was learning signal and sound flow optimization. I was learning how to mix. I was like learning how to be a songwriter and producer. So when I graduated from undergrad, I went straight to the music industry. And I was writing love songs. Got a chance to do some work with John B., who was a big R&B artist at the time in the States. Miss Dynamite, who was in the UK but moving over to the States. And did some work with her, did some work with D12, Eminem's rap group. And while we had like a little bit of success, it was not sustainable at all. And honestly, the only thing that was kind of keeping us going was that I'd signed the artists that I were developing and then did a compilation album. And while we thought we were going to start selling records, that was not the case. We essentially were just being sort of arbitrage as a partner marketing firm. We were pairing brands with up-and-coming artists who didn't want to spend a lot of money on talent. And that was our business. And I didn't realize that. I was like, we're just making money. It's all good, you know? And by 2006 or so, the bottom just dropped out in the music industry. As everyone in this room knows, we know that it's being digital. And our little business was out of business, like almost overnight. So we said one of us should go to business school to figure out what's going on. So I went to go get my MBA at the University of Michigan. And my thinking was that I'll go to U of M, get my MBA, and bring it back to our company, sort of figure out what's happening here. And while I was there, I just realized that like I didn't know anything about business. I was I was an engineer turned songwriter. What did I know about business? Nothing. So I decided to go work at Apple. And I did, thank God, doing partner marketing at iTunes. And I managed all of our sports and music relationship with Nike. And it was grand. And I was like, oh, this is terrific. This is great. And this is 2008, 2009. So like iPhone just came out a year beforehand. The App Store literally just opened, months of me being at iTunes. And it was really, really great. And around this time, I ended up meeting a guy named Matthew Knowles, who has a daughter named Beyoncé Knowles. And he goes,
Yeah, heard of her. Yeah.
Let me get this straight. You were an engineer, you started a music company, you have an MBA, you work at Apple, iTunes, and you're black? Dude, who are you? You don't exist. You're a unicorn. You're not real. And I go, no, I'm real. And he says, well, you should run digital strategy for Beyoncé. And I go, yeah, I should totally do that. That's a thing. That's a thing. So I moved to New York, run digital strategy for Beyoncé during the I Am Sasha Fierce years, which was just an amazing time to be in the Beyoncé business. And it was at this time that I'm starting to realize, like, I'm starting to understand the mechanisms of the things that I had experienced as a content creator, call it songwriter, as a music obsessionist, would say obsessed with music, and also just a fan. I'm like looking at the inner workings, kind of how the sausage is getting made, if you will, as the earlier panel mentioned. And I said to myself, okay, this is kind of cool. But what I realized is that brands were underwriting all of it. All of it. Like, sure, Beyoncé had a partnership with Live Nation, a Ticketmaster that was doing all of her touring, but it was the brands, the L'Oreals, the Walmart, the Nintendos that were underwriting all of these things. And I was like, maybe that's the part of the business I should be thinking about, that brand side, because these guys are, turning on the engine that makes this thing run. So I went into advertising, ended up finding my way to a gentleman named Steve Stout, who's a record executive legend who moved from the world of music into the world of advertising, starting an agency called Translation with his best friend Jay-Z and Jimmy Iovine as his silent partners. And this was all about helping brands thrive in contemporary culture. And that was the first time I heard the word culture in connection with marketing. And I was like, that's it. That's the thing I never had the language to articulate. That's the thing I never knew how to say or why these things were happening. It's culture. And that opened the door for me to explore it as a practitioner, but to really, really get into it as an academic. And that's kind of where I sit now, with the foot in one world of academia and one foot in the world of practice.
I mean, it's just the most incredible story. And I think for so many people here, this marrying of obsessive music love and then this idea of culture is a really great thing to understand and to talk about. I am really curious, in your mind, what does make music particularly powerful as a cultural force, perhaps compared to some of the other mediums that we see?
Because music is cultural production by its very nature. One of the founding fathers of sociology, a gentleman by the name of Emil Durkheim, referred to culture as a system of conventions and expectations that demarcate who we are and govern what people like us do. It's a system that carves out our personhood in the social world and identifies what's acceptable and what's expected of us or people like us. And because of who we are, we see the world a certain way. We navigate life accordingly through the artifacts we don, the behaviors that are normative, the language that we use, and then we express ourselves through shared work. Art, literature, film, television, poetry, pottery, podcasts, music, and brands and branded products become ways by which we peacock ourselves to the world. They become ways by which we negotiate what's acceptable for people like me. Take an example. I was doing some work with Toyota just like 2 months ago. And I was telling these guys, I was like, listen, when I lived in New York City, my wife and I used to drive a little hatchback Volkswagen. But my wife says, look, we need to get a bigger car. We're about to have a kid. So we made a long list of SUVs that we might buy, an exhaustive list of SUVs that we might buy. But there was one SUV that we wouldn't even put on the list. Like, don't even put it on the list because we're never going to buy this thing, ever. Never, ever, ever. What vehicle might that be? Well, that's a Toyota RAV4. Why, might you ask? At least that's what all the folks at Toyota said, what's wrong with the Toyota RAV4? And I go, well, there's a lyric in a Jay-Z song, Run This Town, that says, what do you think I rap for, to push a effing RAV4? And there's nobody in the world that will pull up in front of my friend's crib driving a RAV4. Are you kidding me? They're gonna be like, really, Marcus? RAV4, really? No way. A RAV4 is a great car. It has all the bells and whistles, all the JD Power associates, all the things. But because of a rap lyric, there was no way in the world I was buying that car. Now you look at that and go, well, that's a trivial estimation, but I made a $40,000 purchase decision because of what that car means for people like me. And how was that negotiated? It was negotiated through the music. Right? It was negotiated through the language. And the language that we use through music becomes a negotiated expression of what people like us do. Music is unbelievably powerful. It's socializable in its effort to tell stories that emote affects and cognitions within us and ultimately guide what people like us do.
I would love to know if anyone drives a RAV4 in here. Just curious. I can't even see if we have a hand up, but maybe everyone's a bit too embarrassed now about that.
Rap, that's for sure.
It's just, I mean, that's such a clear example and so helpful to understand. You can't obviously see, I don't believe, this room, but we have a real mix of people in the room at every kind of stage of their careers. And I think what we're really looking for is some of this real practical takeaways that people can leave this room and really understand how to go forth with. So I'd love to know how you think emerging Australian artists can develop the sort of brand ecosystems that you've come to know and study and be part of forming that can extend beyond their music to really create those deep cultural connections that you have spoken about and that we all experience with music on a daily basis?
That is a great question. And I'm gonna break that question up because there's a lot there that I think needs to be unpacked to understand how they all work together. I think the first is about a brand, like building the brand. So there's Australian artists, that's one thing I wanna talk about. There's brand, another thing I wanna talk about, then there's cultural connections.
Yeah.
And let's start with the brand. The brand by definition is a signifier, an identifiable signifier that conjure up thoughts and feelings in the hearts and minds of people relative to a product, a person, institution, organization, entity, what have you, right? It's a vessel of meaning that makes us feel and think things relative to something else. We say things like, the brand stands for something. What we really mean to say is the brand stands in for something else. If we use another rap lyric, Snoop said, I keep a blue flag hanging on my backside, only on my left side. Yeah, that's the Crip side. And that is, if you know that blue flag means Crip, you go, oh, he's a Crip. If not, you go, that guy's so color coordinated, right? Like it's like those who know, it stands in for something else. So this is what brands are. So brands are vessels of meaning. The question becomes, if you are a brand, your personal brand, what do you want to mean? Do you want to mean someone who sings? Someone who raps, someone who plays guitar, someone who's instrumentalist, someone who's a composer? Sure, great. In today's music economy, that is a very, 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 very saturated market to be in.
Yeah.
If you're just another good singer, great. Turn on TikTok, you see a million good singers. The person's a really good composer, great. There are a lot of good composers or producers. So if your brand is to mean that, if it's to mean a good artist or good instrumentalist or good singer, that's a tough way to go. But if you want to say, no, I want to be more than that, the biggest brands, the best brands transcend the category, right? Like Nike sells sneakers, but Nike believes that every human body is an athlete. Big, small, short, tall, we're all athletes, right? It transcends the category. Beyoncé, let's go back to her. I know her very well. But Beyoncé, she makes good music, and that's subjective, but I think she makes good music. But Beyoncé stands in for women's empowerment. And we've known that ever since we've met Beyoncé. Since No, 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 to Can You Pay My Bills, to I'm a Survivor, to the left, Get Information, You Ain't Gonna Break My Soul, Who Runs the World Girls. Like everything about Beyoncé's career as an artist has been through this lens of women's empowerment. As a brand, as a vessel of meaning, that's what she means to represent. So when we talk about being an artist, a brand, we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to mean? That's the first. Australian artists. Actually, no, I'm going to Australian artists last. Let's go to cultural connection. So how do we connect as a brand, as an artist that is a brand, or a brand that is an artist, better way to put it? We make cultural connections by connecting with people who see the world the way we do. You connect with people who believe what you believe. Nike believes every human body is an athlete. Nike isn't talking to everybody. They're talking to athletes or the inner athlete in us. They are connecting with people on an ideological level, which allows them to engage in the cultural discourse beyond sneakers on our feet. Just like Beyoncé can weigh in on things beyond a song in 4/4 or 6/8 that's about love or I'm a diva or whatever the case may be. Like she can be a part of the discourse beyond what she does because she has a point of view in the world. So how do we connect in culture? How do we culturally connect with people, with fans, with the populace? Is by finding ideological congruence. And in a world, in a music world where there is just such great access to great talent, these are the ones that transcend. Just like, if you like, hey, I sell water. Great, there's tons of water bottlers throughout the world. But what if you say, yeah, I sell water, but I believe in death to plastics. That's what I believe. So I sell my water in tall boy aluminum cans, and I call myself Liquid Death, right? Because it's a demonstrative representation of my belief system, not what I sell, not what I do. And while yes, their water is good, but their water is water, right? It's subjective, right? Subjective. And water is parity, right? So the idea there is that these brands, they transcend the category in which they operate, and they connect with people through a cultural congruence based on shared meaning, based on shared beliefs, shared ideology. So what does that mean for Australian artists? For you, what do you and your artists believe? Not what they create, not what they do. What do they believe? And I think the cool thing about being an Australian artist is that the chips are kind of stacked against you. Where you are geographically is sort of off the beaten path of where you just had the Grammys on stage before me. So where a lot of the heat seems to be coming when it comes to the cultural export seems to come not from the Australian space. You had some hits though, I give you that.
We have a lot of bangers.
Of course, right? But it's but look, and this is coming from someone who lives in Detroit, Michigan. We are not in the epicenter of music in the United States. So getting someone to break through has been difficult. But you go, Marcus, Eminem, dog, what are you talking about? You got one Eminem. Marcus, Aaliyah. We had one Aaliyah.
Yeah.
Marcus, Motown. That was the 60s. Right? Getting things to break through when there isn't a lot of heat becomes a challenge. So what do? You got to create your own heat. Don't believe me? Ask the folks in Atlanta. Atlanta is the epicenter of hip hop. Full stop. In the United States. Full stop. Actually, Atlanta is the epicenter of, I would say, R&B as well. It's coming out of Atlanta, and these guys, no one was checking for them. They build their moat. They put a moat around themselves, and they build as a collective. And it wasn't just this artist. It wasn't just Outkast. It was the Southern sound, the sound of Atlanta. I think that as a region, as a country, what's the thing that connects you all as opposed to pulling you apart when you're trying to operate on the international stage? I know I'm being long-winded, but I feel very, very passionate about this. There's an interview that Questlove did some years ago. Someone was asking him about how did the Roots sort of make it big? And he was like, dude, for years, we were selling out festivals. We were like, headlining festivals, had all these things going, but could not sell any records. We had like no radio play, no records being sold. We're like, what is going on? Why isn't this working? We're clearly a good band. Clearly people who know us love us. Why aren't we breaking through? And Amir Questlove said that, they tried to be scientific about it. And they looked at all the artists across decades who had like massive success. And they said, by and large, disproportionately, all these artists were a part of a collective. Whereas Michael Jackson came out of Motown. If it were Justin Timberlake, he and NSYNC came out of that Oakland, Disney, Orlando boy band era. Came all out of all that. You got Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, all came from that. They had like a community. Prince built his own community with the revolution, right? Like Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis came out of that, right? All of this great talent comes from a collection of people that make it happen together. And he said, we had to make our own tribe. We had to build a tribe. So what did they do? They partner with Common, Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Jill Scott. They said Music Soul Child was their pizza delivery guy. He said the guy would deliver pizzas, and he'd be like, yo, I can sing. And they're like, the pizza guy can sing? And he's like, I can sing, dude. So he came in and was like, this guy can really sing. These guys all formed a collective around each other. And I would say that that's the goal. That should be the move for Australian artists. Who are we? Who are we? Not what do we do? Who are we? Transcending the category in which we operate. We're more than just musicians. We're more than just music producers. We're more than just a music industry. We've got something to say. But what is that? That transcends the category, that transcends what you do, but operates at an ideological level such that people culturally go like, yeah, dude, that. Why do you think Chaperone is blowing up or has blown up? Not just because her music is good, right? But it's the story around her. Billie Eilish, not just because she's good, it's the story around her that people gravitate towards. And those who are not in the heat of it all, you gotta find your tribe. That was long-winded, I'm sorry, but I hope that was helpful.
I mean, so insightful, so helpful. I can see so many people writing notes frantically and nodding their heads. I'm curious, in this idea of building brand and transcending and really reaching that ideological level, do you think that work needs to be done at the beginning of an artist's journey? Like, does that need to be solidified as an emerging artist, or can that be finessed over a period of time?
Yes and yes. But I'd argue that it's already there, just hasn't been articulated. Like, you got into this field for a reason. It ain't because it was easy. You know what I'm saying? This wasn't like convenience, like, well, I guess I'll do music. No, like, you gave up a lot to do this. There's great sacrifice. There's something inside of you pushing you to do this. What is that? It's gotta be more than just making money. It's gotta be more than just fame. Right? It's just more than that. What is the thing doing it? What's the thing pushing you? When I talk to brands, they really wrestle with this. Because I say, what do you believe? And they go, well, we believe in helping people. I go, well, why? Because it's good? Why? They're like, well, you say you believe this, but you do that. That doesn't feel like you really believe this. What do you really believe? Why do you exist? Simon Sinek would say. And they'll say, well, we exist to make money. I go, no. Money is a byproduct of what you do. And they go, well, we need money to survive. I go, yeah, that's not why you exist. Like, we need white blood cells to live, but no one wakes up in the morning and say, I can't wait to make white blood cells. No one does, right? So there's something already there that motivated you, inspired you to pursue this. What is it? And to go through the inventory to get there, I would borrow from Toyota here. Toyota has this idea called Kaizen, which is Japanese for continuous improvement. And the way they get to continuous improvement is that they ask why 5 times. So, why were you late? Well, I was late because traffic was heavy. Well, why was that a problem? Because I got out the door late. Why did I get out the door late? I got out the door late because my alarm clock went off. I didn't hear my alarm clock, but why was that? Because I overslept. Well, that's the problem. right? You overslept, you went to bed too late. I mean, that's a terrible example, but the idea is that you ask why 5 times, you get to the core, to the crux of what the issue is. And the same thing kind of goes here. Ask yourself, what do you believe? Why do you do what you do? And it's a difficult thing, man. I've had to do it for myself. But you start there. Like, what do you believe? How do you see the world? And keep asking why till you get to some floor where you go, this is it. And then that becomes the North Star that guides everything. Now, if you haven't done an exercise, you're kind of already into it, you can work backwards. You sort of revisit those things.
Yep.
And we do it anyway. Like, I was telling this class a couple weeks ago, and I was like, you know what happens with musicians? That they spend 10 years making their first album. 10 years, they've been working on this thing, and like, first album comes out, and it kills, right? God willing, it kills. And they go to the second album, maybe it's good, maybe it's just okay, maybe. Third album, in this case, not so good. Fourth album, ooh, really not as good as like the first or maybe the second album. And what do they do with the fifth album? If they make it that far, they go, we went back to basics. We went back to the same producers, and the same place, and the same thing. We went back to why we started this thing. Why did we get into it in the first place? That's what you want to find now, whether you're here in your career or here, because that's going to be the engine that keeps you going. That's going to be the compass that guides the decisions you make along the way.
And we know that artists are, you know, among the best storytellers in the world. So much of this comes down to storytelling and really distilling that story, as you've said, going back to basics. It's such a valuable lesson, I think, for so many people. I am aware of time, so I just want to move on quickly to something that is by no means, I think, unique to Australia, but is certainly something we're seeing, which is that younger demographics here are consuming a much higher proportion of non-Australian music compared to Australian music. And so it's so essential for the Aussie music industry to really be engaging with future generations, with Gen Z, with younger millennials. And so I'd love to know, in your experience, what sort of innovative approaches are you seeing really resonate with younger audiences?
Well, I mean, the truth of the matter is that younger audiences, all of us, but let's just say younger audiences, sort of bluntly, they're getting music through an algorithm. It's an algorithmic music discovery mechanism at play, which essentially means that someone's telling them what to listen to, or they're observing what other people are listening to, and that becomes the thing they listen to. And that sort of populist approach to music discovery certainly shaves off the elbows of what would be profound music, what would be something that is like meaningful. And I don't want to degrade any kind of music. I think that, you know, there's a place for everything in this. The discovery, however, the mechanism by which we discover music, particularly by a Spotify-like object, makes it very difficult for people to find things that are outside of what they would normally bump into. In fact, the more you consume a thing, the more likely you're to get more of that thing, as opposed to new and novel things. So the question becomes, how do we create exogenous shocks to the system? How do you create something people go, what the heck was that? Like, so while you are, you know, creating the moat around the sound and the tribe that is Aussie music, or the Aussie music industry, I think the idea is that how do you poke it? What's the disruptive thing that undoes or undoes?
Undoes. We'll go with undoes.
Undoes the status quo. And like you said, like, this is where artists shine. You know, I used to be a chief strategy officer at an agency called Wieden+Kennedy, and one of the founders of Wieden+Kennedy, a guy named Dan Wieden, would say that creativity is basically subversion. Taking what is and subverting it. Taking what is and reworking it, contorting it. So I'd say this is where artists should shine. Instead of making music that is of the zeitgeist, poke it, bend it, contort it, And by its very nature, people go, what the hell is this? And like, again, the music we talked about from the South, it didn't sound anything like New York hip hop, nothing like LA hip hop, nothing like it. And it forced people to go, whoa, 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 what is this? And it's saying something that aligns to who I am. Yo. Then when that happens, then you activate a new network effect. People go, yo, you gotta check this thing out. Have you heard of this YC? You need to check this thing out. Have you heard of this? You gotta check it out, right? Like, this is what we do, not just with music, but with all things. We're social animals by nature. So the idea is, how do we excite people to move based on shared meaning, shared beliefs, to activate a network effect where people start preaching the gospel on our behalf?
Yeah, so really marrying that disruption with the meaning, with the purpose, because one without the other might not land in the same way, I think.
That's right.
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of Frank Ocean, huge fan. And I could say with great authority that I put 95% of my network onto Frank Ocean, back in Nostalgia Ultra. Like, yo, Frank owes me some checks. I was like, have you heard of Frank Ocean, fam? Because the conversation we were having was that R&B is dead. They're like, dude, R&B is dead. There are no bridges anymore. What happened to, like, what happened? There are no modulations. What's going on? Like, we're having all these conversations among my friends, my peer group, who are also musicians, all these things. And I was like, dude, have you heard of Frank Ocean?
Yeah.
He sounded like nothing that I'd heard before. I was like, yo, have you heard of The Weeknd? They got this mixtape called Balloons. Nothing that I've heard before. Cocaine 80s, nothing like I heard before. It's these exogenous shocks to the system that resonate with us in such a way that goes, yo, I'm gonna tell people about this, not just because I like the music, but because I love my friends.
Absolutely love that. Dr. Marcus, I think we have time for a couple of questions because I've actually kept track this time. I've already seen a hand shoot up, so we do have a roving mic. We will just get some audience questions. Let me know if you can't hear these and I can repeat them back.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Dr. Marcus,
Yes.
can you hear that?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant.
Hi, Dr. Marcus. Thank you for your time today. Just listening to you has been incredible. I work at a small independent marketing agency, and our team last year were obsessed with Charlie XCX. Weirdly for us, it was a Brat Winter. No one thought about that in marketing, but hey, whatever. But it was that thing of, it felt for a lot of us that people were finally finding out who Charlie XCX was, when as early adopters we'd known about them for a long time.
Yeah.
Who do you think is the most important part of the tipping point process? Is it the industry, is it the artist, or is it the audience?
Oh, it's all of it. You need all of it. I think Charli XCX is a really good example because it wasn't just her music that broke through, it was the idea of brat. It was the language of brat and what brat meant, like being a little sloppy, being a little, but still confident in it. And you need all the pieces along the propagation to make it work. So, if you think about the diffusion curve, like the bell curve, it's the Gaussian curve, really, but the diffusion curve, right? It's like widens in the middle, kind of edges out. When a new thing enters the zeitgeist, it starts on the fringes. Only a few people know about it. People in the inside know. And if they tell more people, it begins to reverberate, gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes normal. You need all of those mechanisms at play to make it reverberate. You need all those mechanisms to get the propagation that you're going after. With one without the other will never make it work, right? So if the early folks are onto it, but don't tell the people who are sort of in the middle, it falls apart. The people in the middle who aren't activated to tell the people in the masses, it falls apart. So you need all of those chains along the daisy chain for the network effect to happen.
Over here.
But it starts with the believers. It started with the people who are like, yes, this. It starts with them. If you don't have them, you got nothing.
Thought you said believers, and I was wondering how we were getting into that territory this early in the morning over here.
I mean, listen, I think one of my biggest learnings in business was my biggest failure, and that was launching what we call the Beyontourage, which was a terrible, terrible failure that turned into the Beehive. Not because of our doing, We launched this thing thinking it was going to be a massive success, and it was a party no one showed up to. And out of fear of getting fired, we all sort of scoured across the internet to see why people weren't joining our new fan club that we created for Beyoncé online, to realize there's already a community of people who not were just fans of Beyoncé, they believed what she believed, and they used her music as cultural production. And we said, let's cut bait on this nonsense we were creating and just partner with people who already believe. Activate those people, and they go activate other people on your behalf. And you follow that up just a few years later, she launches her Beyoncé album with no media, just the Beehive.
Unbelievable.
Dr. Marcus, thanks so much. We're really getting a lot out of what you're telling us, and it's terrific to be able to connect with some people in the American music industry. My name is Jeff Ewell-Smith. I live in Sydney. I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter, keyboard player, singer, pianist, songwriter, published poet. And I'm also creating a small but very ambitious business called Extraordinary Entertainment. Now, I just wanted to make an observation to you quickly. I've lived in Australia all my life. What I observe about the Australian music industry is that Australian people seem to have an infinite amount of money to spend on overseas artists. We have big sellout concerts in Australia all the time. You know, recently Taylor Swift, I think she walked away with about $300 million out of Australia. But I'd read recently that Australian musicians are the lowest paid people in Australia. So there seems to be a bit of a, I'll put it bluntly, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but there seems to be a bit of hypocrisy in Australia that we're very good at supporting artists coming to our country who are already very wealthy, but not so good at supporting our local artists, many of whom are busking. But anyway, here's my question. What are the shortcuts for Australian artists, the shortcuts? Let's cut to the chase. We want to succeed. We want our music to be heard. We want to make money. We want to succeed. Doctor, what do you think are the shortcuts that an Australian artist can take to get their music out there, to raise their profile, and to start, you know, having some success?
Man, Jeff, if there were a shortcut, my brother, if there were one, man, it's just, that's the problem. That's the challenge, is that there are no elevators to this, at least not for most of us. They're mostly stairs. And I think that this is what happens when you get saturation. This is what happens when you get the proliferation of access. You know, 30 years ago, if you were a good performer, dude, people would hear you, be like, oh, this guy is great. You need to get him access, as long as you were able to kind of get your foot in the door. Now, everyone's foot is in the door, so you don't know which foot to sort of pick. And the truth is, then you let the market decide. And like we said earlier, when the market decisions are being made on an algorithm, it's not based on merit, it's based on popularity. It's a popularity contest. And that becomes a challenge. So, is there a shortcut? My friend, I wish I knew. I don't think there is a shortcut. Everything here is the stairs. But you can take the stairs with a greater probability of success by leveraging what we know of humanity. So to your point that you're saying that Australians don't support Australians, tell me about it. I go back to Aria. Aria came to my school when I was in high school. She's like, we're the same age. She came to my school, she's in high school. She released her first album with the person we won't speak of, named R. Kelly. Released her first album. She comes to our school, and I remember being in the cafeteria like, yo, Aaliyah's out front. And everybody was like, so? So? Did nobody care? No one cared. No one supported Detroit artists until Aaliyah got signed with Missy and Timbaland. Then it was like, Aaliyah's from Detroit, oh my God. Eminem spent years working the circuit in Detroit getting no love. But the minute he was signed by Dr. Dre, oh my God, Eminem's from Detroit. Trust me, I'm with you. I understand. I think that you can't wait for the altruism of the market to see their hypocrisy. Instead, you have to subvert it and go, this isn't about you supporting me. This is about you supporting a way by which you can communicate your identity, a way by which you can signal to the world who you are. There's this great campaign that started in Detroit about 10 years ago now. Yeah, maybe a little bit more, called Detroit versus Everybody. Yeah. And the idea is that, Detroit's, always getting overlooked, always getting sort of shunned. People crack jokes about Detroit. So Detroit's like, we had a chip on our shoulder. It's us versus everybody. And that idea unifies the city. It unifies the population. And what do we know about there being an in-group and an out-group? You borrow this from Edward Bernays, the godfather of propaganda. He says that you can unify a group of people by declaring an enemy of the state.
Yeah.
And the enemy of the state is everybody who ain't Ozzy. If you ain't one of us, kick rocks.
Well, Dr. Marcus Collins, it's Aussies versus the world is what I'm taking from that. No, but thank you so much. So many valuable lessons on building brand, how integral it is to really know your messaging, how you rise above to really reach that ideological level. And I think this really is applicable to everyone, whether you are an artist or whether you are a label, whoever you are. This is central to building a successful connection with whatever audience you might reach. Thank you so much for your time, for your insights, and for your generosity.
My pleasure. Take care. Best of luck, everybody.
Oh my God, how amazing was that? So great. Thank you so much, Marcus. Have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you are. And we will get you down to Australia as soon as we possibly can, because I know there's a lot of people here who'd love to have a beer with you. So thank you so much again.